Okay, so before I delve into my own creepy story, I want to acknowledge that there were many, many times that throughout the following encounters that I acted very stupidly and unsafely. So before anyone comments how dumb I was, know that as I type this, I have the South Park Joseph Smith Dumb 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 song going through my head. When I was 19 years old, like most people my age, I was attending university and was living in a private house off campus with a few other students. As I'm not the most sociable person and didn't go out very often, my daily routine was pretty consistent. Wake up early, morning lectures, lunch at home, evening lectures, and then home for the night. Campus was around a 15-minute walk from the house, which I made alone, as my flatmates were based on different campuses. One day, I was walking to university with my earphones in when I noticed a red car crawling along beside me. The driver was male, around 5'9", quite muscular with a few noticeable tattoos. He was staring straight at me, and so I pulled out my headphones to hear what he was saying. He asked me some general questions, name, what I study, etc., and then for my telephone number because he'd like us to go out on a date. I wasn't interested, but I'm one of those people that has a hard time saying no, so I gave it to him but changed the last digit thinking I wouldn't see him again. Even though he claimed to go to the same university, it's pretty big, and he probably asks a lot of women out, so he wouldn't be too fussed. I then hurried off and forgot all about it by the end of the day. A couple of weeks later, I was walking to university again when I spotted the red car turning the corner on the opposite side of the road. Feeling a little embarrassed, I avoided eye contact and walked a little faster, only to hear the sound of tires screeching on the road behind me as it made a sudden U-turn. Now on my side of the road, the red car zooms past me and comes grinding to a halt a few meters ahead. The guy gets out and rushes towards me. I'm shocked, but I continue walking until he blocks my path and begins shouting in my face. "Why haven't you been answering your phone? I told you I wanted to take you out. I've been calling you every day for weeks and you haven't been answering." He wasn't much taller than me, but it felt like he was towering over me. He was really close and very angry. I decided that telling him I wasn't interested wouldn't be the best thing to do as he was so furious, so I said I'd been busy, that I had finals, that I had switched off my phone to focus on my work. He calmed down instantly and his whole demeanor changed. It was almost a Jekyll and Hyde situation. He then said, "It makes sense that you're busy. I've seen you walking to campus every day. You're in the library every evening now. You shouldn't work so hard." The only new addition to my routine were nights spent in the library, but it didn't seem weird at the time because he had told me he goes to the university too, so I just shrugged it off. He then claimed to be going to class too and asked if he could drop me off. For someone who reads extensively about serial killers, in particular Bundy, you'd think I would have known better than to get into the car with a stranger. He wasn't even offering candy, so I'm officially dumber than a 5-year-old. I rationalized that the campus was 15 minutes away through fairly busy streets, which I knew well, and he had calmed down now, so I got in the car. Almost immediately, I felt it was a huge mistake. For the first few moments, we were silent until I couldn't stand the awkwardness any longer. I asked him what he studied and what year he was in, to which he gave very vague, short answers, so I figured he didn't want to talk and fell silent again. Then it started. "I'm sorry I got so angry. I just really like you. When I spoke to you, it made me like you more, and I noticed you had really clean fingernails, not like some of these whores with painted nails you see. I fucking hate girls like that. Do you speak another language? I like it when girls speak to me in another language when we're having sex." I laughed most of this off as I didn't know what to say and noticed we were approaching a side street next to my campus gate. At this point, I was thoroughly freaked out and just wanted to get to the closest, safest place I could find. He thankfully pulled over and let me out, insisting on walking me to the door because his next lecture was about to start and was only a few doors away. I slipped into the nearest room I could find, pretending it was my next class, after saying my goodbyes. I slipped into the nearest room I could find, pretending it was my next class. Inside the room, I waited a few minutes hoping he'd be gone, and he was. However, when I started walking to my actual class, I noticed he was leaving the campus. After this encounter, I decided to change my walking route, which successfully meant I didn't see him again. One evening, I noticed I had a mass email from my course organizer, warning all students, especially females, to be vigilant as a rape had been reported the night before in an area close by. A description was eventually released to the perpetrator, which sounded eerily similar to the man in the red car, mostly due to the similarity between the tattoos described in the report and the ones I had seen up close. I don't know if he was caught, but I never saw the guy ever again. I've heard and read a lot of stories from here, so I decided to share my own. This is actually a story I've never told anyone before. When I was about 6 or 8 years old, I moved into a big house with my mom, dad, and 3 or 4 siblings. I have 4 little sisters and 2 little brothers, so I'm not sure how many of them were there at the time. We had one of those alarm systems that you arm at night, so that if any doors or windows were opened, it would go off, and after 10 seconds, if not turned off, the cops would show up. One night, I fell asleep in the basement, wrapped up in a blanket. My dad was at work and wouldn't be back until late that night, so my mother hadn't set the alarm yet. Around 11:30 or so, I felt a chill from the wind. I opened my eyes and froze. In front of me was a tall man, dressed in all black. I can't say I remember what he looked like, but I do remember the wide grin he gave me. "Shh," he whispered, patting my head. "Just go back to sleep." I was so shocked and tired, I did just that. I never heard him enter, I never heard him leave, but when I woke up the next day, he was gone. When I woke up and didn't see him, I just assumed I was dreaming, but then I noticed the basement window was wide open. Since that night, I have trouble sleeping next to opened or unlocked windows or doors. It's not a fear per se, but it does give me great anxiety. When I was younger, I used to live in an apartment complex in a really bad part of town. My parents used to let me play in front of our door as long as somebody was watching, which was usually my mom. Things were fine until a year later. A young man, who my parents thought was a shady character, would frequent the apartments to hang out with a few of his buddies to drink and do drugs, particularly heroin. While he would be waiting for them, I'd be playing outside, unaware of him just standing there watching me and smiling to himself. Although I didn't remember that much about him at the time, I could only describe him as a strong and muscular man with an ominous air about him. Anyway, hour after hour, this man would sit on the steps of our apartment and try to play with me. Being overprotective as she was, my mom would take me back inside and not let me go back until he left. This kept happening more and more, and finally, it died down when my brother was born. Then it got much, much worse. Now I was 4 and my brother was 1. We were playing while my mom was doing laundry, and I spot the guy hiding behind a bush near my neighbor's apartment. It looked like he had something hidden behind his back. We made eye contact, and I kid you not, he gave me the most devilish smile I've ever seen in my life. Instantly, I got uncomfortable and very creeped out, so I called my mom. She asked me what I wanted, and I told her in the best way a 4-year-old could. Immediately, she dropped what she was doing, grabbed both of us, and took us inside. At first, I didn't know why she took us in, but now that I'm older, I'm grateful she did. Later that night, there was a shootout between him and the neighbors. He had a gun on his person and ended up shooting a member from a rival gang and escaping. Fast forward 9 years later, I came across an article from our local newspaper about a guy who'd been sentenced to life without parole for gunning down a rival gang member. The second my mom saw the article, she explained it's the guy who used to watch me when I was younger. Apparently, he's from a local gang and used to be in and out of prison. That alone was enough for me to get my heart pumping. This is a story my mom told me. It was the late 80s and my parents were sick of the city life, and what with a baby on the way and all, decided they would move away from Chicago and into the suburbs. They looked at all kinds of houses before settling on a place in Aurora, Illinois. It was scenic and tranquil and exactly what they were looking for. They even managed to get a good price on it, due to the passing of the former owner. Even though my mom was a little nervous about the move, my dad was, and continues to be, a really rational and scientific-minded person. About 2 months after they had moved in, my mom woke my dad up in the middle of the night, terrified. She whispered she could hear something weird happening downstairs. My dad sat still and listened as a loud banging-like sound came from downstairs, almost as if someone was fumbling around with furniture, along with a sound that my mom describes as an odd sort of cry. My dad jumped up as they both heard the banging getting louder and louder as the person began walking up the stairs. My mom grabbed the phone and began crying, trying to explain to the operator what was happening. My dad didn't have any sort of weapon with him in the bedroom, so he grabbed the lamp, unplugging it from the wall, holding it like a club, and pressed himself against the wall, readying the lamp to knock the man out if he got into their room. My mom was still on the phone with 911 when the man began trying to jiggle the doorknob. It was locked, but my dad braced himself against the door as the jiggling turned into a heavy pounding. Apparently, he began yelling really loudly, but my mom says she can't quite remember what he was saying because most of it sounded like nonsense. After about 5 minutes or so, the pounding stopped and the rambling and banging moved back downstairs, but my dad and my mom were told by the 911 operator not to leave the room until the officers that had been dispatched arrived. My mom says they waited for what seemed like hours, but was probably around 15 minutes before they heard the police sirens. They peeked out of their bedroom window to the porch and watched the man in white clothes bolt out of the front door, only to get tackled by the arriving police. It turns out the man was the mentally ill son of the previous owner. He was released from the hospital and, without comprehending the passing of his mother, tried to go home. He couldn't get in the front door, so he kicked in a basement window and crawled in. My mom says she felt really bad for him afterwards, but couldn't ever shake the feeling of unease in the house. They ended up moving about 2 years later. A friend of mine is on Reddit, and she loves going through all the stories. She wanted to post this one of mine, but conned me into signing up instead. Sadly, I have many stories, but this one was the most tragic. So my friends always say that if something unlucky is going to happen, that it will most likely happen to me. They also say if a creeper is around, then I will end up being the one creeped on. Both of these statements are unfortunately true. I've been stalked multiple times, some ending pretty badly, and I have the worst luck imaginable. This story happened 3 years ago, and I still have nightmares about it. My mother came to stay with me for a week, which I knew would be a nightmare. We can hardly stand to be in the same room as one another, so fighting is inevitable. On her 5th night here, we got into a heated debate about religion, and it somehow turned into a full-out screaming match. About an hour into the screaming, my apartment manager knocked on the door. Before I could even apologize, my mother jumps in and says that I had been threatening her. I was so shocked and appalled that it threw me into a mini panic attack. I grabbed my keys from the key rack by the door and took off. It wasn't the wisest thing to do, I know, but I was so frazzled that I didn't know what else to do. I ended up sobbing my eyes out and just driving. This went on and off for about an hour and 70 miles. Driving has always calmed me down, so even after the tears subsided, I kept going. About another hour later, I saw an exit for a dam, which surprised me. I had lived here for 2 years and I had no idea there was a dam anywhere close by. I decided to go take a look, even though it was 3 a.m. and pitch black. I still wasn't ready to head back, and this seemed like a good distraction. It was another 30 miles on a desolate road before I finally reached the dam. It was hard to miss because it was the only light I had seen for those 30 miles. I crossed the dam and saw that there were a couple turns leading to campsites. At this point, I also realized that there was a legitimate lake. Yeah, I know, dam equals lake, but I didn't really put the two together. I decided to flip around and go back to a little parking area I had seen near the dam. Once there, I parked and my night took a turn for the terrifying. I parked and proceeded to make one idiotic move after another. I rolled down my windows and could hear the sound of water hitting the shore, but in the light of my headlights, I couldn't see where it was coming from. The mosquitoes were pretty bad, so I rolled my window back up and started fishing around in my backseat for a flashlight that I knew I had somewhere in the car. Then I remembered that I had it in my trunk. Now, for what happens next, please feel free to label me as an idiot. I surely am. I popped the trunk, turned off my car, opened the door, stepped out, closed the door, got the flashlight, closed the trunk, went back to the car, and it was locked. My doors unlock when you open them, so I have no idea how the doors became locked again, but it was. And, like the moron that I am, I still had the key in the ignition. I knew the door should have remained unlocked, so I hadn't really thought about taking the key. Instantly, tears started to well up because I knew I hadn't even bothered taking my phone with me. I panicked for a while, but then I remembered the campsites I had seen, and I hoped that maybe someone would be in one, and that they would have a phone I could borrow. I started walking and fretting about waking up some poor stranger in the middle of the night, but I didn't see any other options. Each campsite I came to was completely empty. I think I checked 15 or so before I started to get nervous about how far I was wandering from my car. My battery started to fade on the flashlight. I was only about halfway back and my panic reached a whole new level. For whatever reason, the parking area in my car seemed like a safe haven, and I started sprinting. Remember what I said about being a moron with bad luck? Yeah. In my panic and in the darkness, I got switched around somewhere, and I ended up in a dead-end campsite, even though I would have sworn that I was still on the main road. This is when the major tears started. I panicked even more and ended up in yet another campsite. It felt like I was just getting more and more lost, and I couldn't hear the water anymore. So I calmed myself, and I decided to stay put till morning, which I knew wasn't too far away. I sat down, wrapped my arms around my legs, and proceeded to try rocking myself into calmness. It worked well till I saw him.